Okay, welcome to the Locker Room podcast. We've got our second live show. We previously did a coaching roundtable with Colin Nally, Ross Bennett and Stevie Poacher, which was really popular. So we've come back for a version number 2 around youth coaching. I'm completely sick of Ross Bennett taking over my show the last few weeks. So I'm back in the hot seat, Ciaran Deely, and I'm hosting, and I've got one of our own, Barry Mullane, hurling coach. And Barry is founder of Active Sports Coaching, is a PE lecturer in Mary I, Limerick, and a coach developer with the GA and the Camogie Association. Barry, you're very welcome, and thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here, Ciaran.
Stuff. Also then we've got Shane Smith. So Shane holds an honours degree in sports science and health and a master's in education, previously working as a GPO with myself in Dublin. He's a primary school teacher now, actively involved in coaching with under 7s, hurling and football, under 9s, camogie and senior football. And Shane is personally responsible for Dublin going for 6 in a row this year. You're very welcome, Shane.
Thank you very much, Ciaran. Great to be here. And that's, of course, not true at all.
Last but not least, we have Brian Cuthbert. So Brian is, amazingly, he manages to be primary school principal in Bishopstown Boys School, supports the coaching and games development in Croke Park in relation to player and coach development. Also is chairman of Bishopstown GAA. And also he says co-wrote, but I say wrote the recent 2019 GA Talent Academy and Player Development Report. And Brian, I think we're going to have to get you on a different time just to specifically kind of delve into that document and run through it. I've got it here with me tonight. Okay, it's going to be an exam at the end of the session to see how well you know the document you wrote yourself. But we might touch on that, but I think that will be perhaps a different podcast show just to really go into that one into depth. But you're very welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, well, thanks a million, Ciaran. Looking forward to the chat.
Good stuff. Okay, just to remind people, head over to deelysportscience.com. There's loads of stuff going on at the moment with some webinars with Stevie Poacher. There's CPD session for coaches over the winter with Ross Bennett. There's some GA positional videos going up there as well, which you can find. And also thanks to our sponsors, ripped.app. We need to pay the big guns. Joe Coulter is taking most of the money. I can't even feed my young little 6-month-old little chap. The money is flying into Joe Coulter's account. So thanks for the sponsors for helping us out with Joe, keeping them on board. Okay, first topic, what we'll focus on, lads. We're going to have a quick breakdown of the child, youth and adult, okay, and anybody who's in the coach development with as regards GA or who have done coaching courses will have come across that concept. Brian, I'll start with you because you helped write the new GA development framework. What's your breakdown of the child, youth and adult, and what ages do you specify child, youth, etc.?
Yeah, I suppose firstly, Ciaran, so people probably know the last 2.5-3 years the GA have gone around county to county on the back of John Horan, sending a kind of a missile across the bow of the GA in terms of what was going on at academy level. So out of that spawned a player development framework being developed by the same committee, and that's that document there that you held up a while ago. But in that player development framework, so everybody is aware again, there's a new approach to player development across the organisation, where camogie, ladies football and GA hurling football. And it's based on an Australian model called F10, if anybody has ever seen it. And basically you have a foundation stage, you have the talent stage, and for us we have an elite stage. We didn't include the M stage at all in terms of mastery. We just left that off. So the foundational stage, and you'll see an awful lot of this coming in the next 12 months, 2 years. Any of you guys who are involved in Coach Ed, which I presume all of us are. The foundational stage is going to have 3 levels in it, and possibly even 4 when it comes out. But at the moment, there are 3 levels in it: F1, 2, and 3. So F1, if you take the old stage of child, so from the initial involvement nursery level, up to maybe when the child is 7 or 8. I'm very slow to use chronological age brackets for this now, but just to keep it simple, up until the child is 7 or 8, they're playing F1. Then they go into F2, which is from 8, obviously, to the point of formal competition. Normally in GA, even it's changed in the last couple of weeks, your formal competition is starting at under 13 probably from here on in. So that space from 8 to 13 is F2. And then F3 takes us from 13 formal competition right until the time that you no longer play Gaelic games. So that's the club space. And I can go into that in more detail if people want to in a while, or if there's more questions around it. Yep. Then over to the right of that, if any of you have seen the framework, there's an intersection of circles where you have the T space, talent 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 being schools of development or schools of excellence, call them whatever you want to, but initial involvement in academies. 2, breaking into maybe under 16, moving on to 17. 3, then moving on up onto under 20 teams, and finally 4, you're inside, and most players now are at third level, and they're playing Sigerson Fitzgibbon before breaking into the elite in senior intercounty game. So if we take all those spaces and if we populate all those spaces with age appropriate activity and competition and proper age appropriate coaching, and we have outcomes for all those spaces so that we can actually see when it's possibly the right time for transition and actually manage those spaces in terms of transition, we just believe that we have a better model going forward, or framework, call it model, framework, whatever you want, for the GA to actually be very clear on what it is we want to achieve in terms of player development. So that's very, very quick here on, but you probably have to have the framework in front of you to actually fully understand it. But I would say most people have seen that at this stage,
Yeah, I think it's a thing that will come on board much more in the next few months and next year, won't it? Yeah,
like, to be fair to Croke Park, they get, I'm not saying because I've been involved in a bit in it, but they do get bashed around a bit for approaches, right? But I've been in about maybe 7 or 8 long meetings over the last, of the last 12 months, where coach education especially is being cut apart, chopped up, and re-envisioned visions to kind of resembling what people want on the ground. So I think people are going to be very, very excited when they see this actually delivered. And that's the challenge for Croke Park, to actually deliver what they're trying to do, because it's not going to be easy. But they're going to be delivering coach education based on the player development framework. So if you think about it, the F1 space, that nursery space, there's going to be just particular coach education all around that, and CPD aligned to it. So I would say in time, it would be a bit like coaching credits that you'll get, for different CPD workshops you'll go to, you'll get different amount of points, and you'll be able to build up credits to actually move through the levels and achieve, I wouldn't call them badges like as in the FA soccer stuff, but achieve recognition in terms of the qualification in terms of coaching. And same with F2, same with F3, and same with all the T spaces. So at the moment, anybody could walk into any of those spaces and coach, but you mightn't receive any support from the GA in terms of what you should be doing at those levels. But I think that's all going to change.
Yeah, I think the coach education model, which myself and Barry and Shane and a lot of people on this webinar and podcast would have been part of, it probably needed to be renewed and re-envisaged, as you mentioned, and just a fresh kind of approach had to be brought to it. It's interesting because in the professional soccer arena, it's chronological in terms of from under 9s to under 11s, we call foundation. From under 12s to under 16s is youth development. And then under 17s up to under 23s is professional development. But we're operating in that, what you may call kind of elite arena anyway. And we don't have other teams taking our players for other games and stuff like that. The big thing I took from the report really, and we won't go too much into it now, is how unique the GA is in terms of the club, the county, the schools. Like, players are getting pulled and dragged in all different directions, and I like how the report is attempting to put the club at the center of it all, but also, and importantly, I always think there is a place as well for the extremely talented young players as well, and they need to be nurtured also.
Yeah, I think if we think about it as a kind of a stretch model, so if you take your best players, obviously need to be stretched so that they actually will fulfill their potential. At the same time, there's participation within the GA is a huge driver, obviously. So the club has to be central to all things going forward. I think the framework actually puts the club very much central in terms of player development, but at the same time realizes that there are talented players and even players that we, how do we decide what we could go into the big debate? How do we decide what talent looks like? But players of potential need to get opportunity. And I think the idea of the framework is to allow people experience positive experiences, not the idea of going to the academy, being deselected and being kicked back to your club. I hear this line all the time, going back to your club. What does that mean? Going back to your club? That sounds ridiculous to me. I think the academy experience, we call it, is something that you go and experience, and if something else comes of it, great. And if something else doesn't come of it, you have all that positive experience to actually put into your career as you go forward at club level. But I think the crucial piece is this, and we can get into it later on when we talk about culture. But the crucial piece is a very clear organizational core in the center of player development across the GA, because the GA is unique. You're absolutely right, Ciaran. I don't know of any other organization that's dealing with 2 games in terms of hurling football at one time across club, school and county for lots of players, and also the possibility of playing up where people are playing on multiple teams in their club and school. So like we've seen boys all over the country when we went to research all of this, the data came back and there was boys playing on 11 and 12 teams, which is absolutely frightening. But the most frightening part of all that, and this is where the report is very strong, I hope, is that there's nobody directing who does what when. It's whatever is up next or who's first up, first dressed gets the call here. So I think the GA have made a decision that we can't continue this. We may have got by with it in the past, but now we're very, very clear in saying if we want actual player development to take place, we need to be very clear in terms of our organizational core of who is doing what when. And that's why you're starting to see these debates now around age grades, these debates around split seasons, these debates about third level, these debates about second level. It's great to have the debates and ultimately come to a conclusion that makes things better for the players, not for us, not for administrators, but better for the players, so that in time, and it's not going to take 6 months or 12 months, it's going to take time, we're going to have a very clear model of player development across the organisation. And I'd be very excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's important that in the report you brought in the governance, the education, the different stakeholders, the sports science, the games program. So in other words, you brought everything into a kind of a holistic development model, because if you're to focus on one of those things and your games program lets you down, or your sports science is not there to monitor maturation and relative age effect and stuff like that, I think it will. I think it could have fallen down. So it'll be interesting to see how all that comes together now in the next kind of.
Yeah, and I don't mean to hog the conversation, but I think you're on. That's where the coach education is going to have to come in very, very strongly, in terms of bringing those type of stakeholders to a generalistic, holistic viewpoint on player development, right? Because what's happening is we're finding that people might have huge interest in one of those areas. So if you take the 4-corner model of the FA long ago, you might have huge strengths in one of the corners, and that was what was driven. Whereas what we're now saying is that there's place for everybody, but somebody needs to map out how this looks like for a player of 13 or 14 or 15, and what role do each of these stakeholders have at that stage of development. And I think, to be fair to Shane Flanagan in his new role in Croke Park, he is very, 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 very committed to actually trying to bring the model of development to that level. Now, it's not going to be straightforward or easy, but I think that's the desire. And as I say, I would be very excited about it.
Yeah, no, good. I think some of the talent squads, the county talent squads, have probably got a bad rep over the last few years as regards bringing young players of like 13 or 14 up to different parts of the county to go and train. They're not allowed to play with their clubs. you know, it's got a bad rep over the last few years, but like I know of, I mean, obviously Stephen O'Shaughnessy in Dublin has been doing an amazing job for the last, you know, decade or more than a decade, really. Chris Collins up in Derry, the lads in Wexford. Like, you can have a very holistic, really, really good program there of the talent academies, whereby, I mean, the aim, and I hear it a lot, is keep as many kids in the system for as long as possible and to give them that experience, let's say, which is the right approach, I think.
Yeah, and just on that, I suppose, Ciaran, you know, this was the report group surveyed 32 counties, travelled the whole country, and absolutely to a person saw the commitment, the ambition, the organisation, the talent, the quality of the people involved, and could not for 1 second falter anything that was going on, and weren't even going there. They weren't even attempting to do that, but absolutely found people who were crying out for help, whether they were under 16 players or whether they were coaches. They were crying out for help. Teachers sat in rooms that said they felt alienated on their own. And county coaches felt that they were under pressure to deliver results for the county so that they could get the next job. So there were huge pluses to the academies, but I suppose the narrative that's been peddled is incorrect in a way, in terms of that they're the most evil thing in the GA. They're far from that, but it's just the case that I think a bit more consistency of approach across the country has to be taken, whilst remaining cognizant of the individual context of the 32 counties and the cultures within them. So that's a bit of a balancing act as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question just came in there. So it's called, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, the GA Talent Academy and Player Development Report 2019. You'll find it on ga.ie in the coaching section, I believe, which I hope Shane Flanagan and the lads are going to renew and improve and everything. It's over on our website as well, deelysportscience.com. In the blog section, Brian has previously written a blog about it, which is a very interesting kind of introduction to it. And I think everybody should definitely take a read of that. Okay, we leave that there. Barry, sorry, Shane, I'm just interested because I hear a lot about, people always say children are not small adults. And it's a saying that you hear a lot in the kind of nurseries and academy settings and everything like that. In its kind of simplest form, why does there need to be a different approach to coaching the child versus coaching an adult, let's say, which you do both, obviously?
Yeah, I suppose the needs are very different. I mean, fundamentally, the reason why children come and play sport is to meet their friends, have fun and play. And once those needs are met, we generally see children remaining in sport. An interesting study there I was looking at earlier, in that 38% of girls and 39% of boys dropped out of sport because it wasn't fun anymore. And like, that is just a massive statistic, in that they simply dropped out because it wasn't fun. So like, we're not in control of so many things as coaches, you know, but we are in control of the fun element. We're not in control of the school environment, the home environment, other external environments. But when they come to us on that Tuesday or that Thursday, we are in control of the fun warm-up that we do. We're in control of how we coach. Are we like autocratic, or, you know, are we bossy? Are we demanding? Are we more relaxed? Is it a shared responsibility? So that's so important to keep children involved in coaching and coping skills too. I mean, you know, some children are that sub every single week. You know, they expect to be a sub, and they are a sub. But no child should be a sub every single week. I mean, the rights of the child is to fundamentally play, you know. I think Wales brought that in a few years back, actually. The right of the child is to play. So, like, every child deserves equal game time and inclusion and to be involved in a team. So I suppose their role as coaches is to keep as many playing as possible for as long as possible. And, you know, to create this love of sports that's far more important than any medal or any trophy that we pick up. And, you know, healthy children make healthy adults, I suppose. So like, our role is so important to just like stick to our values, because, you know, as a coach, you kind of are what your values, and there's such a depth to coaching that goes beyond picking up medals, beyond picking up trophies, beyond picking up leagues. Because we're not coaching like little athletes. We're coaching little children. Little people, and it's just the right of the child to play and to be included and to be involved. And that's just so important that we just chill out a little bit as coaches too, and we're not coaching in the All Ireland final at under 11 or under 12, and looking at children if they lose a game, if they win a game, they get over it very, very quickly. Because it's only sport. It really is only sport. It's only fun. It's recreation and it's enjoyment.
Yeah. Well, some coaches, I've always heard people will come back and say that, well, children are inherently competitive. Like if you get a bunch of kids in a playground, doing whatever little game, whether it's kicking a can against the wall or whatever, like they'll bring that competitiveness to the sport or to the game, and we shouldn't be the ones to kind of inhibit that and to stop that.
Yeah, children are naturally competitive, and adults are too. I don't know any of us who like losing a game of cards, a game of football, a game of golf. Of course we are, but maybe we're all naturally competitive, but maybe we're all just not naturally cooperative. And maybe it's that cooperation that we're trying to develop in children. Like a ball between a ball per child is brilliant for skill development, but like there's a depth to sport that goes beyond skill development. There's like a ball between 2 or a ball between 3, I'll pass to you because I know you'll pass it back to me. It's that empathy and that trust that we can try and develop in sport. So yes, we're all naturally competitive, but at the end of the day, it's a team sport that we're playing in, and we're looking at children, getting the head up, passing the ball, delivering the kick pass, and knowing that they might get that ball back in time too. So that cooperation can be developed in training, because sometimes that's not there. And we look at games, for example, we look at a standard under 8 match, and it's 9 aside, is it maybe? And you have 18 children on the pitch, and generally you might have 2 or 3 children dominating the ball at that age, and you might have 14 or 15 children getting a touch or 2.5, and that's probably what we need to work on too. And I'd love to see us with a reduction of numbers per team at under 8 and under 9, because at the end of the day, it's about including more, involving more. And if we reduce, like I had a situation a couple of years ago where I had a camogie game actually, and both teams had 12 players. And the coach and I, a very cooperative person with good dialogue, with good communication, I said, what do you think about if we don't play the full pitch and we split the pitch in half and we play across the pitch 6v6? So suddenly we're splitting the team in half, we're maximising opportunity for everyone to be involved, we're maximising the holistic side of it too, but also the technical side. There's a lot more striking, there's a lot more hooking, and it was brilliant to see more children involved. And there's various studies around, there's a basketball study around that too, around small-sided games, and it suggested that they went from a 4v4 to a 2v2, and there was 60% more technical opportunities in that game. 60% from a 4v4 to a 2v2. Now, of course, 2v2 is not very practical for GAA or for hurling or football or camogie, but it's really worth considering when we see so many children on a pitch. It really is worth considering that. What can we do to improve this? And I know logistically it's a bit tricky, an extra pitch, maybe an extra referee, but the young ages, keeping more involved, keeping more included, and then we'll retain them as we go through the ages.
Yeah, absolutely. Our Arsenal Foundation phase in their academy have an interesting one where part of the curriculum is cooperative games. Now, I haven't seen exactly what they do. I must ask Des Ryan about it, but he doesn't like giving out too much stuff. The boys up in Arsenal are quite close about what they do and some of that. But it's quite an interesting concept, and you touched on it, Shane, just some sort of cooperative game. And like, if you think about it, it may not even include a football or a hurling slitter. It might be something completely different. And it probably links in a little bit with the concept of practicing multi-sport, doesn't it, at that young age as well?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like, specialization is something that's really, really topical at the moment. But I love incorporating other sports into my training, regardless of what age group it's with. Like games like handball, basketball, like tag rugby, like really fun warm-up games, like tag rugby is just incredible for developing that little step or that bit of agility. Games like chasing, Ciaran, simple games like chasing. I don't know anyone who doesn't like a warm-up for a game of chasing. It's incredibly fun. And those movement patterns are the exact same movement patterns that we see in a game of football or hurling at Mogi. It's multi-directional, high intensity, a little bit chaotic, great for peripheral vision, great for spatial awareness. And that's really the movements we see in the game. So those sort of high intensity, fun games. Handball is another great game too, and handball where you can't move in possession. So I played that in training a little bit where you have 6v6 and it's handball. And when you receive the ball, you can't move. So what we're seeing there is a really a good increase in like children looking around them, scanning the area, peripheral vision, where's my teammate, and they have to move. So we stop that one player dominating all the time and everyone else feel included because they know they have a good chance of getting the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good as well because it allows your players to get a little bit of a taster of other sport that, you know, they may have always wanted to go and play a bit of rugby or, you know, something else, and a different sport. And it allows them to kind of just tap into that a little bit, you know, without kind of losing them completely to another sport. Like the 10,000 rule, our rule has largely been debunked, but there is something still in that, like you need to practice at your sport. If you're to master your sport, you obviously need time and lots of contact hours as well. So I can see obviously both sides of that.
But the crossover of skill sets is incredible. You look at it like a badminton player and how they have quick feet and good reactions. Of course, that's applicable to Gaelic games. You look at division of a basketball player, have some of the greatest GA players we've had have been high-profile basketball players. You know, have great spatial awareness to set up goals. You look at the value of playing even if playing soccer and that ability to like get your head up and scan around and see what's around you. So it's invaluable when it comes to Gaelic football. Not to mention so other sports. So playing a broad range of sports, I really would encourage my own children to play as much as possible.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing as well, like I did it with the London senior team as well, where we actually had a basketball night, and a lot of the, like aside from the technical aspects, but a lot of the tactical outcomes that you're looking for, like compactness in defense or, you know, rotation of your, you know, center forward and midfielders, like you can teach that through basketball or through another sport as well. So you can either go and have a full session of basketball, or maybe like if you have the facilities of it, or with rugby or whatever, you can just drip, you know, 15 minutes as kind of part of your warm-up or just after your warm-up.
For sure, yeah. And like you look at what we've taken from basketball in recent years has been the screen to get the shot off. So because of the Pac D, the way Gaelic football has changed and evolved over the last few years, you see a Pac D. So what we're doing now is we're looking at people looking to see if they can impact the game without the ball. So that little screen, we see an awful lot of diagonal movement in around the D, so the shooter can get the shot off. And we got that from basketball, of course. And again, looking at new sports, looking at how they get the shot off in basketball, it's fascinating. And we have seen that creep in a little bit to GAA.
Yeah, well, I mean, it famously came in with Jason Sherlock, didn't it, into the Dublin team. I think you could certainly see aspects of his playing and coaching experience. Shane, a quick question came in from one of the gang there. Would you do tag with a senior men's or a senior women's team as part of your warm-up?
Yeah, again, just looking at the movement patterns of our games, I believe training is about replication of movement patterns of games, you know, and a replication of game movement patterns will be tag, will be chasing. So that really prepares the body for the demands of the game. So like, I don't know anyone who doesn't like the game of chasing as part of a warm-up. It's really stimulates you, no matter what age you are. It really gets you going. It really gets you interested. It's fun. It is fun. And I've played tag for warm-ups right across the board.
Yeah, yeah. I had an interesting day one day over in India with Terry Phelan, and we ended up doing tag, and there was a little bit of a breakdown in communication between the Indian lads, the Brazilian, the Spanish, and the English. But we got there in the end. Barry, I'm just interested then. What are some of the differences or the issues that you would have encountered from coaching that, you know, kind of young kids team, and coaching that like older youth or adults? Like you've a lot of experience right across the ages, right across the phases.
Yeah. The first thing really, you know, is the attention span is a lot different, you know, with the smaller kids as they get older. So, you know, when you're giving your instructions, how you deliver is really important. You know, your language, you know, what you say is really important. I know that's important at all ages, but you know, keeping it quick. And you know, I believe that, you know, if you're going to explain something to a group of kids, you've about 10 seconds to do it, and it's go play again. The content, ensuring max participation. Shane spoke about it there. A ball each. I'm a big believer in a ball each. For kids, for skill development, but chasing games as well. I won't go on about too much, but you know, there's a role for everybody in a tag game. You know, there's a role for taggers. You're running away from someone. That sensation of getting chased as well, and you know, the social interaction that it has. You know, do I help my friend or do I save myself? Those kind of things. The different abilities. So at young kids, the abilities are going to be different. You know, at senior hurlers, they're all going to be good players. Same with footballers, any sport. Whereas if you're coaching an under 8s nursery, it doesn't matter. You're going to have players who are very strong, maybe middle of the road, and then players who are very weak. So you have to find a role for all them kids as well. They have to be coached too.
Barry, it's a real challenge, isn't it? Of like something the first piece of advice I always give to any person who contacts me looking for advice in coaching or anything is just to get out there and coach, and to coach the youngest of the kids as they enter into the sport, because it's such a challenge. Like, it's easy to tell an inter-county player, you know, advise them by kicking the ball over the bar. It's something else about trying to tell to teach and facilitate a 5-year-old to do a hop or a solo or a kick or a strike. It's a real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what you're going to have as well is you're going to have like different interests there. If you're coaching minors, well, adults, they're there because they want to be there. Coach your under 8s. What you're going to have is kids who are mad to be there. You're also going to have kids who don't really want to be there. They're there because their parents want them playing. You know, you have to try and motivate them as well. And at the end of the day, you know, as a coach, what you want to do is you can't make them good, but you have to. Our job is to kind of make them want to be there.
Yeah.
If you understand me.
Yeah.
And then coaching adults, minors, even, you know, what's the focus? You're kind of focused starting on winning then, whereas with children, it's all about development. It's all about. There's a great quote, an old lecturer of mine, Martin Toms over in the University of Birmingham. He always says that, you know, what's success and what's winning, and he'd tell you, it's not silverware. It's about your kids coming back week after week, season after season. Then you're winning.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
That's it.
You made great point, Barry. Ciaran, following your question
Yeah.
on technical coaching too young. Like, I coach in the nursery too, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, and we show and catch, and we bounce and we catch, and we roll. You know, but like, did you ever try and teach a 5 or 6-year-old a hand pass, or the technical elements involved in a hand pass? You know, hold the ball in the hand you don't write with. You know, with the hand you do write with, draw back. And, you know, not to mention the solo, you know, point your toe in the air, kick the ball. It's so challenging for children. That's why I think we'd slow down development a little bit and really focus on the ages. Brilliant listening to Brian there, on the ages of 5 to 8, you know, that first phase. Make it that fundamental movement: run, throw, catch, hop, balance, coordination, agility. That good core fundamental movement skills are so important, and not to rush into technical coaching too young.
Yeah. Well,
I've had to, like when I was early in my coaching career, whatever you want to call it, coaching hurling, you know, I was always, like what you said there, Shane, you know, what hand you right with and hold it up, and I'd be go, you know, I want to hold the hurling that hand, right? And then, oh, that's right, very good. And I was just, you know, and they're looking at me going, what is this fella on about? You know, where it's just the language you use is just so important for those children. Like I say, you've about 10 seconds to explain to them, and just being careful what you say, and show me your pencil hand, put that at the top, and then let them off and play and let them swing, or, you know, from a hurling point of view. And just for the hurlers out there, something, especially with the small kids in sessions, is, you know, the small hurley. Now, Martin Fogarty will tell you that it doesn't really matter, or, you know, to that effect, you know, Kilkenny did it, do it a certain way, but, you know, for me, it's the smaller hurley, the better. You know, they're going to have, especially new kids, they're going to have a cage around their head, right? Some of them a helmet for the first time. You know, it's important to make them feel comfortable as well in their surroundings, and nice, small, little, light hurley with their helmet, and then let them off and let them play. Whereas as they get older, that's not, you know, with adults, it's just come, play, have your session ready. There's so much, it's so much more challenging coaching the children.
Yeah. Do you know, I'm in a whole new phase of my coaching, because I have a 5-month-old, 6-month-old little boy born in the summer, and I'm looking at him, and he's at the stage where, and I'm sure you guys know all of this already, pure exploration, absolute exploration of everything, of the curtain. He's interested in the curtain. So it's like, okay, explore that, go and have a look at it, or a picture on the wall, and he thinks that little, you know, giraffe is his friend on the wall. And it brings me back to like coaching those really young kids, where all they want to do is explore and experience, and you need to think of innovative ways to allow them to you know, to flourish in that environment, to let them, I suppose, Barry, like you're saying, in some ways, to let them make mistakes, to let them find their own way, and then you probably need to just step in and facilitate them and guide them along, isn't it?
Yeah, and my fella is at the stage now where he's exploring, jumping off the couch and seeing what happens. So,
Nice.
Just on that, if I can come in there.
Yeah.
I agree completely with Shane and Barry regarding that early phase, and look, in the framework that's coming, it's referred to as the F1 phase. The F1 phase for Gaelic games coming could be the same as the F1 phase for rugby, soccer, badminton, hopscotch. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That phase, if you went to one of those sessions and that phase, you shouldn't, be careful saying this, but you shouldn't really be able to say it's hurling or it's football or it's whatever. It should be so general and so focused on those fundamental movements that the children don't have naturally at the moment, unfortunately, for the last 20 years. That's what the focus is on. And then the second piece, as they move out of F1, when they've mastered those fundamental movements, we need to be teaching them the game. So I have this huge debate with people all the time regarding, and especially hurling, regarding technique and learning technical skills over the actual skills, what I call the skills of the game. Because the game involves understanding, and learning how to play the game is a huge continuum from learning how to play chasing and invasion games to actually learning how to play a game of hurling and football. So there's a huge amount of learning there. But if we can actually take what Shane and Barry have said together, I'm brought back to the Coaching and Games conference last year when Chris Van der Hagen from the Belgium FA made his presentation. If any of you haven't seen it, go and watch it. I think there's a window for us here in terms of moving out of the FMS and F1 stage and into the F2 stage, where they start in Belgium with a 2v2, and then they teach a 3v3 where we're playing in triangles, all right? So suddenly, and the way hurling is going, if you're watching all the matches this year, they're playing in triangles. All the good teams are playing triangles all the time, and the triangles are getting smaller and smaller over the last 5, 6, 7 years because people are keeping possession, at all costs. So when we move into the F2 stage, I think it's an ideal stage where we can teach games based on the learnings from the F1 stage and all those invasion fun games, And now we're moving into 2v2, 3v3. The next one is 5v5. And then we can teach a 7v7 where it's 2 triangles. And ultimately we're building up and layering up to get to the stage where we can teach a 15 versus 15 game. But that's way down the tracks. And I think that, and I agree with Shane and Barry, what they've said, if we can keep these games as small as we can and then interject with technical parts that we want to teach within the game, though, not in isolation. I think that's a huge part of where we need to go to. So the model is there already. We just need to adapt it to Gaelic games. And it's 2v2, 3v3, 5v5, 7v7, probably 9v9, probably 10v10, then 11v11, and up to 13v13 and then 15v15.
Yeah.
Whereas at the moment, we're jumping from probably 4v4 up to 7v7, up to 9v9, and then up to 11v11 at under 12, or 13v13 at under 12, and then 15 aside at under 13.
Yeah.
There's a huge change needed there.
Yeah, definitely. Brian, you better be careful if the lads down in Tullaher and the Roar in County Kilkenny now hear you saying that a hurling session looking like a football session, they'll have your head for it. But it's interesting, in QPR, we would have something very similar. And the things that Shane and Barry are saying there about the fundamental movement patterns and the hop and the jump and the brace and the squat and the lunge and everything like that, like we're still doing that at aged 18, 21 into first team level, you know, players who have played or will play in the Premier League. There's no difference. Like, you're still talking about that foundation all the way on. And I think, as you say, Brian, it's just adding a layer of complexity. And I think soccer or professional football, whatever you want to call it, it does it well in that they spend a lot of time on technical practice within the session, as well as games and little match scenarios, and the 1v1, the 2v1, the 2v2, the 3v2, the 4v2, the 5v3, you know, the 7v5, all these little scenarios that when you break down the game and you look at the video and you see it, you know, 2v1 defenders moving the ball out from the right back position, you say, well, we do that on a daily basis. That's your boxes or your rondos or whatever you want to call it. So I think it's that foundation can actually continue on right up to the highest level, you know, senior intercounty. You just add a layer each time.
But the foundation is so important, Ciaran, of a community.
Yeah.
Like, if having that foundation and research shows that, like, the mastery of these basic skills is achievable by age 8. It is achievable by age 8. So in our nurseries, age 5, 6, 7, 8, we can achieve these fundamental movement skills: the running, jumping, throwing, catching, hopping, landing. But they also suggest that they plateau by age 10, and it's quite challenging after that. So if we get to the stage where we're not rushing into skills, we're not skipping fundamental phases, and we're focusing on that movement first and skills second. That's so important for us moving forward, not skipping phases, not rushing to elitism, not putting jerseys on 6 and 7 year olds and asking them to play a match too young, because they're simply not ready. I don't know any 6-year-old, and maybe 7, who's ready for a match yet, because the concept of like movement or spatial awareness or kicking to a teammate, we're only developing those movement skills. So the issue around like balance and landing and throwing and jumping, they are so important for that age, because they do plateau by age 10, and they're very hard to get them back, according to research.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question, Shane? Because one of the lads in the chat there just asked about like S&C, and I know you've spoken a lot about this on Twitter, and it's really interesting stuff. Like the concept of S&C, or physical development, throughout the ages, and how does that look? I mean, I can come from the more sports science, you know, strength and conditioning side, but you as a coach, like, what kind of stuff do you implement at that kind of young nursery, but also into the youth levels?
I suppose, again, it's about phases. And when you look at like fundamental movements, like within fun games, there is the squat, there is the lunge. You know, if you play games like chasing games or crawling games, we squat naturally, we lunge naturally. So it's incorporating these I suppose fundamental movements within our games. Yeah. And of course, then as the children get a bit older and move towards teenagers, like we use the words S&C a lot, but I love the term like athlete development, and not just S&C at 14 or 15. Like, why not like nutritional development, education, lifestyle, rest, recovery, the importance of, I think someone mentioned earlier on, maybe it was Brian, not playing for like 11 teams at that stage too. So just the importance, just the overall education, and not just focusing in on S&C as important as they are. I know full well I'm background in the sports science too, and I know how important that S&C is. It's fundamentally important, especially with maybe a lot of sedentary behavior we might see nowadays. But the idea of incorporating everything under the one umbrella, and maybe athlete development and educating them across the board.
Yeah, exactly. I think in the youth phase, just quickly, because I think we could do another podcast, and we probably will, about youth S&C, and we'll get Ross and some of the lads involved. But just from my own point of view, like in the professional setups, we would do S&C from the ages of, let's say, 12 up. It's all about technique. It's out on the pitch. It's the movement patterns. It's the squat, hip, hinge, lunge, jump, landing. It's very, very basic primal movements. And the question came through about, well, can you load that? Do you want to put weights? If the technique is great, that's fine, but you need to think about the load that they're going through on the pitch in terms of their training. And also remember, for boys between the age of 12 and 14, they're hitting their growth spurt, their peak height velocity, it's called. So you need to be careful about that. Girls a little bit younger, from 11 to 13. So look, you can load them up a little bit, but as long as their technique is good. But remember, you probably need somebody with some S&C knowledge. If you don't have that, as Shane said, just the movements, the fun games and stuff like that will take care of plenty of athletic development. Shane, I'm going to jump back to yourself about, I mean, I read your blog post just earlier today, and you speak about looking through the eyes of the kids, the concept of inclusion and exclusion, and that kind of idea that as adults we can probably deal with exclusion. You know, we can compartmentalize it or speak to people about it, whereas with children, they really struggle to do that. And it probably leads into that more holistic concept of coaching, not just the player, but also coaching the person as well, the child.
Yeah, it's like, not every child that comes up to our club has dreams of playing in Croke Park, you know?
Yeah.
Like, maybe us coaches, we assume they do, but they don't. And some children come training for so many different reasons. You know, children training to meet new friends, to socialize, as Barry said earlier on. Some love the matches, some love the games of chasing. Some might like you as a coach, and you could be a really positive role model as a coach for that child. And maybe that's what brings them up to training. So that concept of like empowering the new parents and empowering children to have fun, to enjoy themselves, to feel important, to feel valued, and the little conversations that we can have with the holistic side of it, like, how are you today? You know, it goes such a long way. Knowing every child's name is something that's very, very important too. And, you know, that way you've that personal connection, and you're building relationships with the parents, and you're trying to, you know, encourage children to come back all the time. So the holistic side of it is so important too, because I think I read somewhere that out of 100 children in every club, one will play inter-county. So just the one. So we've 99 other children who could play such a massive role in our local community, in their club, a chairperson, or they could be a great coach, or they could be a treasurer of the club. And there's lots of different roles for everyone in the club. And I suppose focusing, obviously we've got a responsibility to facilitate all the children, including the children who may be really, really high achievers, but they are a small minority. They're a small minority, and the importance of facilitating all the children, meeting all their needs, to ensure you're giving them a positive outlook on sports, you know, and encouraging them to see sport as a good thing. And I love nothing better than meeting children that I coached, they were 10, 15 years ago, and maybe they're 25 now, or they're 30, and you see them out jogging, or you see them playing recreational five-a-side football, and that lets you know that you maybe you have instilled a love of sport and a love of exercise, and that they're still doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that leads in nicely. Brian, you speak a lot about, I mean, you did your PhD about creating that environment or fostering that kind of environment about holistic coaching, like Shane speaks about there. But from what I can read, you nearly put the coaching behaviors before that, so that if you can get good coaching behaviors, that helps to kind of foster and improve the environment in which the player develops and performs in. Or have I picked you up wrong?
No, you've hit the nail on the head. Ultimately, good people make good coaches because they make good choices. But the environment piece is where my interest lies, obviously. Because I think the whole research around player development has moved from a nurture space, a nature space to a nurture space, and now it's gone environmental space. So we had the big debate many moons ago over born with talent or not, and those born with talent, it was a case of just simply drive on and away you go. Then we went to the big argument about, you mentioned earlier on, Ericsson's 10,000 hour rule, where we said you need this amount of training to be this good, which was debunked. And then Ciaran Deely came along with his, playful practice and, the backyard games, and, there's another approach in terms of diversification rather than specialization. And that argument happened. But now the research is very, 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 very clear in the fact that the most malleable part of player development is actually the environment or the context in which the development takes place, right? So for me, it's a fascinating area in terms of how actually you can just take a club, how you can input somebody as a coach and make sure that they're doing all the things they should do to get the end product of a player reaching his full potential. Now, the complexity of that is huge, but my understanding and the way I'd look at it, I try to make it very, very simple. We need to formulate a culture around the person, both the player and the coach, so that the coach ultimately makes the right choices for the player over a long period of time. And that's where we get this wrong. We get this wrong because we think it needs to happen today, whereas player development, we need to keep, as GB Hockey call it, we need to keep the end in mind. So we continuously need to keep the end in mind and take the pressure off people so they're allowed to make decisions over that have the player at the center, and it's over a long period of time. So I suppose that's where it gets down to the nitty-gritty then of kind of culture and where that fits in. So if we take environmental effectiveness, and I don't know if I explained this quite well, look, Ciaran, but you start off with your preconditions. So what are the preconditions in the club? Do you have enough money? Is it Chelsea, or is it are you in Division 4, or are you Kilkenny?
Scunthorpe.
Yeah, Scunthorpe. Like, are you Kilkenny in terms of the hurling tradition, or are you Leitrim, or whatever the case is? So you have preconditions, and then you have the processes in terms of the training and the competitions that the player is exposed to, and then you have this working on top of all of those things, and the most driven factors are the organization culture within the environment. So for me, that's the fascinating piece. So how do the good clubs and the very good clubs, so how does Crossmaglen do what they did? How does Nemo Rangers do it in Cork? How does Corofin, it might be a couple of reasons, I'm not sure, do what they've done over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years? So what has happened? And the answer is usually based around organizational culture, because it is very clear that this is what we do around here. And outlying behavior then isn't tolerated, because that is very clear that that's not what we do around here. So suddenly everybody's very clear on what it is that we must do to coach in this context. Yeah. So everybody's very clear how we should coach in our club when our culture is very, very strong. We get the culture piece wrong, and then there's a lack of clarity, and you can coach whatever way you want to. Yeah. So if we take it actually to its fine pieces, Ciaran, we talk about maybe 3 levels of culture. We talk about, that impression you get when you come into the club. So what does it look like? Are everybody wearing the gear? Is there symbols? Is there signage? Is there crests? Is there whatever? And that's the first piece. And then the second piece is they espouse values. So I think Shane mentioned values earlier on. So as an individual, you probably have your own value set, but a club or a county has to espouse values. So we're all saying the same things. We all believe this is what it is we're after. But ultimately, the final piece are the basic assumptions, the bits that's way down in your head, your actual behaviors. So what actual behaviors are you actually carrying out? Do they align to the espoused values? Do the espoused values align to the artifacts and the symbols and at first level? So when you get those three aligned together, like steps of the stairs, you have a clear, strong culture. When you have a clear, strong culture, you influence the coaching processes and the preconditions almost, because people, the preconditions will improve. And ultimately, individual development and team development will flop into environmental effectiveness in terms of a positive way because of getting that culture piece right.
Yeah.
Now, it's a difficult thing to explain
I think, and it's a really, really fascinating area. I think an interesting one when I started with the London senior team at the very beginning, and I was 32, fresh into management and everything like that. I thought, right, let's get the coaching right, let's get the sports science right, because that was my area that I came from, my day job. Get the medical right, whatever, and then that will prepare the team. And the longer I spent in the position, the more I realized that obviously you have to get those right if you're a smaller club or county and you're trying to punch above your weight. But the importance of that environment, core values, mission statement, vision, objectives, the goal setting as well, if you want to do that. It was massive. I kind of realized over time that at the beginning I thought, well, that's a little bit wishy-washy for me. And, I want to get into the science and the coaching. Let's just get out onto the pitch and do what we have to do. But over time I learned, I think probably the hard way after many, many defeats with London, the importance of that kind of, just the shared vision. And as well that it's easy to say those things out. It's easy to put it up on the dressing room wall and everything, but do you live it as a player, and do you stick to your core values as a coach, for instance?
Yeah, and I think, you've hit the nail on the head again in terms of, those in-your-face stuff. They're the easy things. That's the level one of culture, where you put up these lovely sayings and these lovely mottos and these lovely pictures. And that's fine. That goes up, right? The next level of that then is actually, people espousing values. So telling and clearly articulating that this is what we're about, and we're all sharing these values. But the final piece is actually the behavior. And I suppose if I could sum it up in a story, I remember talking to Billy Morgan a long time ago, a brilliant, obviously a brilliant Corp and a brilliant G man, but probably most particularly a brilliant Nemo man. And he was the guy in that club who actually, one of the guys, one of two or three people who really made the club. But he told me when I was chatting to him that he was at an under-14 game, say the previous week, and one of the coaches who was in charge of the under-14 team wasn't a die-in-the-wool Nemo guy who would come through the ranks. It was one of the parents. And at halftime, they were winning the game, and the coach brought on 4 or 5 subs that he had, right, to give them game time. And after about 10 minutes of the second half, because he had weakened the team, they were losing the game. And another parent came down to the fence and put the coach under huge pressure to put back on the players that were taken off. The coach said, okay, we're going to win the game if I put them back on. So what's he do? He lines them up to put them back on. And Billy said to me, he went down and he intercepted the coach and said, that's not what we do around here. Under no circumstance are you to take those children off, right? Yeah. So the coach, obviously he was Billy, so he did what he was told to, left the players on, they lost the match and made no difference, right? The point being is the culture and the drivers of culture and the representation of culture within a club, who those people are, who are those chiefs, right? And how they drive the culture at the same time in terms of the same approach, it suddenly becomes very clear to everybody that this is what we do around here. So the level 1 artifacts, the pictures on the wall of Nemo winning all these county championships, married to number 2 about we all give in Nemo, we doesn't matter up to minor, everybody plays, everybody gets equal game time, to actually the actual behaviors, that is what we do. So if you can align those three, suddenly you have a club or an organization that is actually matching its values and artifacts to its actual behavior. And the coaching part then is the easiest part, right? Because we all know there's content out there to beat the band, right? So we can bring in whatever content we want, but if we're within a culture that tells us and guides us and directs us to behave in a certain way, we can marry this brilliant new content to the behavior, where the coaching can be completely holistic, where the player is at the center, and where the club is putting no pressure on anybody to win anything of any importance until they're 17 or 18 years of age.
Yeah.
So that's where for me the fascination comes around coaching, and how culture can sit on top and either hinder the coaching or actually support it. Yeah. So you hinder it in clubs where the culture is poor, and you end up with these guys who will do anything they can to win, or you will support it by having a very strong culture that says this is what we do around here and this is how we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, Shane, just to go back to you about when you mentioned about exclusion before, and like that topic of bringing on and off subs and stuff like that. I mean, I was with an academy previously where players they be brought along as subs and may not come on at all, and they were told that, well, this is elite level, and this, this is preparing you for the future, and this is football, to the stage where the academy I'm at now, where we sometimes bring 2 subs, and we bring on those 2, with a good significant portion of the game to left. And if there's an injury, well, then we play with 10 men, because there's learning for those players to play with a man down. And, there's lots of different learnings at all stages. But the point being that if you're being brought to a game, you're there to play, aren't you? You're not there to sit on the bench.
No, that's why we call them go games. Everyone gets to go.
Yeah.
And it's so true. That's why they are brought in. And I would love if we got to the stage where maybe we revisit the amount of players per team, as we discussed. That would be a wonderful stage. But I was fascinated listening to Brian there about club philosophy, club culture. That's so important that the club, when new coaches come into the club, maybe they're given a set of guidelines or expectations or a philosophy about what the club is about. So in this club, we want every child to get equal game time, every child to be included, every child to get to play in goal, back, forward, midfield, and every child to maximize their ball contact. Because here's a scenario in a club. Let's say the under-9 coach thinks the children need to get fit, and he wants to run laps. The under-10 coach is brilliant and encourages inclusion and chasing and small-sided games. 11 coach maybe thinks that 12v12 in training is okay. The under-12 coach, they might be really, really brilliant at empowering new parents, and they've got a great setup. So if everyone's doing something different, as Brian said, there's not that continuous philosophy or continuous expectations. So the importance of coaching committees or club committees just to filter down their expectations to new coaches or to new parents about what's expected. I think that's a really, really good way of delivering information about what's expected and what the club wants to see on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. Barry, a question came through about small-sided games, and I know you spoke in your blog post previously from a quote from Bernstein about repetition without repetition, which I really like that quote actually about games. So maybe first of all you can explain that concept, and secondly somebody asked about are there any negatives to doing small-sided games with young children, like in terms of, is that what you should be doing even at those young ages of under 7, under 8s, under 9s, that you can still do small-sided games, which I presume, yes, you can, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. But come back to the Bernstein quote there, repetition without repetition. Yeah, so Dave Allred, right? So he's a very world-renowned coach, Johnny Wilkinson, Johnny Sexton, Francesco Molinari, and he'll tell you that, you know, if you're repeating the same action to try and get better and better, your technique will suffer. If it's, you know, if all you do, let's take hurling, right, hit the ball over and back constantly, it's going to weaken your technique. So the idea from Bernstein was that you repeat the striking action or the kicking action, whatever sport, but in different ways. So basically, the repetitive action should be making a decision. That's my kind of understanding of it. Yeah. So that comes into, you know, game-based activities where you, if you're working on your striking or your kick passing, where you game where the players are constantly kick passing, but there's a bit of pressure on you. My favorite quote, and I think I had it in the same blog, I read, like most people, read lots of coaching stuff and listened to podcast stuff during lockdown. I read Dennis Bergkamp's autobiography, and he said that every pass must have a thought, and I thought that's brilliant, you know. And this, you know, our job as coaches is to kind of not to numb it. So that's where I am a big believer in repetition without repetition. Is making a decision should be the repetitive action.
What did that mean to you? Like, because everybody would take their own meaning from that, but let's say from Dennis Bergkamp's, every pass must have a thought. What did that mean to you as a coach, for instance?
So for me, it's let's say I'm on the ball, and if I'm passing it over to Brian all the time, the coach is telling me where to pass, where to run, making every decision for me. Whereas if I'm passing it to Shane, or I'm passing it to Barry, or to Brian, or to Ciaran, it's because he's in a better position, or because I can get the return, or because he's making a run a certain way, you know. Yeah. So the player's making a decision. It might end up turn out to be a bad decision, but it doesn't matter. You know, I always find it funny that you know, people go, "Oh, he's a poor decision maker." Well, I'd rather a poor decision maker in my team than a non-decision maker, a person who just wants rid of the ball, whereas at least they're trying to make a decision. They're trying to do something creative. Yeah. And then that comes back to then, if I go on to just for a sec, the small sided games, absolutely for younger kids. You know, encourage the kids to be creative, to try stuff. When I was coaching, particularly with say 10s, 11s, 12s, I was coaching a team. My club in Dublin was Fingallians before I moved back home to Tip, and I started coaching a team up there. And I just said, boys, there's no one going to give out to you on this team. You know, it's just going to be do what you think is right and express yourself. And if you're playing games and coach is getting on to you for making a poor decision, they're not going to make decisions anymore. They're going to be afraid to have the ball, and they just want to lose the ball. Whereas if you just encourage kids to express themselves and go and play, I think that's the beauty of games-based stuff for children. And whether it's 3-on-3, and I've seen 3-on-3s work, it's brilliant. I did a soccer, the PDP1 it's called, with the FAI 2 or 3 years ago, and you know, they do 3-on-3s, 5-on-5s, and I think it's the same for hurling and football. Small-sided games, even overload games. You know, so if you play 8 versus 4, you know, it's just you're teaching the team of 4 maybe more positional sense, in a fun way. And you know, fun should be the vehicle for learning. It shouldn't be just about not just about like having great crack. There must be a bit of learning too there. So the overload games are great, and then for the team of 8. There's more of a chance of getting the ball and having a bit of time to use the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that. Yeah, very good. Well, one question that came in, and I'm aware of our time, guys, so we'll wrap up with a probably one question each, really. Barry, one question came in yesterday from one of the members, DSS members, about, to be honest, it's probably my brother who has a little kid in Galway, as a joke, but an under 7s or under 8s hurling training session. I think in some ways novice coaches and maybe some senior coaches are more afraid of a session like that because they don't know what to do with them. Whereas they probably have some experience of playing at adult level or playing up to youth level, so they know in general what a training session would look like. But to an under 7 or under 8, like, is it a whole series of activities and games and some technique, or what does it look like to you?
I put the ideal, like in a perfect world, we don't live in a perfect world, but you know, you'd want, if you've got, I worked in different clubs as when I was a GPO in Dublin, and I was in a small club where you'd be lucky to have, 15, 20 kids maybe of your under 10s or your 8s, right? And you might have 2 people with them, as opposed to when I finish up in St. Bridget's, where you could have 90 under 8s, right? And lots of coaches, so you've lots of stations and you're working on different skills, and that's the ideal scenario. So lots of stations, lots of touches and stuff like that. But the reality is that it doesn't always work out like that. So what I would say is, particularly to players who are going back into their club, it might be their first team or come down to help in the nursery or whatever it is that anyone that would study, and the lads I'm sure are aware of this, I've looked into it, you would have come across Kretschmer's 6 features of PE, and it comes motor competence and or meaningful PE, motor competence and fun and all that. But my 2 favorite were delight and personally relevant learning. So the delight is knowing your players and recognizing if they're doing well. And what I mean by that is, delight for one kid might be picking it up on the run and sticking it over the bar, right? Delight for another child might be just the right foot in front of the left, kicking the ball, or holding the ball in the right hand and kicking with the right foot and mastering that. So recognizing that, and the second one, personally relevant learning, then is just kind of describe it. It's like, why are we playing this chasing game? I was doing this with a 5th class the other day, and I asked them, what sports do you play? And there was a range. It was hurling, football, soccer, rugby, basketball. And I was explaining to them that we're playing this chasing game. It was a tag game, and why it's beneficial to them. This is going to help their hurling. This will help their football. So making it personal that way as well. So that's the advice I give the coaches coaching the really young teams. They might be used to a certain way, and when they go back down and get a dose of reality with the smaller kids.
Yeah, exactly. I think we do a lot of that in the club as well, about the individual learning plan. So every player has that plan, devised by themselves, and the coaches like facilitated, whereby what they need to work on, what they enjoy, what they're good at, kind of make it move a strength to a super strength. So I think that's really, that kind of individualization for the players is really good. Shane, just last question for you. I know it's a kind of a topic that you're passionate about as well, is like retaining those players and trying to mitigate drop off of that teenage group, which is such a challenge. And you can take whatever age group, from 13 to 18 to 19. Like, we do experience in the GA, like every sport really, a massive drop off, don't we? But and maybe they'll come back in the future as adults at some stage. But like, what, I suppose, can you speak a little bit about the issue that we experience in the GA, and maybe how to kind of mitigate against it?
Yeah. There was an interesting piece of research done maybe a year or 2 ago around the dropout in the GA, and we looked at by age 12, it was 25% of children that left GA. By age 14, it was 29%. By 1/3 were gone by 16 or 18, and then like 75% were gone by the ages of 21 to 26. So there's statistics that were in that report. Like, one of the most common questions I get through email or through Twitter is like, when do I start to get serious? When do I, at what age, like, do I have to get serious? But like, who says you have to get serious? Like, when it comes to play and sport, and I think children are the experts, and those who are ready to get serious, be it at 15 or 16, are the ones who might take the footballs or the hurls or the slitters home and do their own practice in their own time. Like, who says we have to decide when to get serious? And like, if we let children judge how like defeat is interpreted, we'll soon learn who the experts are. They get over it. very, very, very quickly. In terms of retention, like a light switch doesn't just go on at 13 or 14 and then say, okay, let's get serious now.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't work that way. Every single child is different. We have our late developers, we have our late bloomers, and it's about like trying to retain them. And the philosophy of retention, I don't think changes from 8, 9, 10 to 13, 14, 15. A positive environment, good coaching, smiling and saying hello, ensuring that they're with their friends, lots of scoring opportunities in their games and training, and you know, sticking to those values are what will keep children within clubs. So not just flicking a switch because maybe a failure's around the corner and you really think we need to go 4 nights a week for a tournament, you know. But it's about just keeping it all nice and simple, maintaining those needs of fun, of friendship, and of play.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept because you see it a lot now in even in the adult as well, and you can associate it with youth teams also, of moving from that kind of transactional relationship where you're there to win and the players give the coach something and the coach give something back to the players, to that more engagement and investment. And you know, if you think of like Klopp with Liverpool over the last few years, they're absolutely invested into this journey together, and whether they win, lose or draw, they'll probably enjoy the journey along the way.
Isn't the journey the most enjoyable part? You know, we all remember training through as adults through the winter nights and developing a camaraderie, and we get to a game, and you know the season goes on for 9, 10 months, but the journey is always remembering that season and the memories made, and what the outcome. Like none of us, I wasn't blessed that I won loads of trophies as a player, but I've unbelievably fond memories of the people and the friendships made, and they're still formed now. So that's very, very important too. Not everyone is lucky. I mean, one team out of 32 wins the championship, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Brian, just final word, I suppose in summary, really, where do we go from here within the GA now as regards like coaching and coach development? And I presume the report that you were part of is going to play a big part of that now in the next kind of 6 to 12 months. It feels like to me, counties and county boards or county committees, as they're calling themselves now, are kind of getting their houses in order. That I see in the report talk about Croke Park sending its tentacles out into each county, to each county committee, and getting sports science help, getting improving the coach education, pathway managers. Like it seems to be kind of getting its house in order a little bit throughout each county.
Yeah, Ciaran, I think again, as an organisation, you know, the GA relies usually on volunteerism and altruism and people giving of themselves to their community or to their county. And I think the GA can never, ever, ever lose that. But in terms of governance, I think the GA have to do something, and it's all over the report, in terms of a linkage and a better linkage between the head office, right, which is Croke Park, the provincial structure and the county structure. And for me personally, and I'm only speaking on my own behalf here because I'm not employed by the GA, I'm employed by the Department of Education, but for me it is very, very, very clear that it's not good enough anymore for counties or provinces to head off and just do their own thing. Everything for me has to be centralized in terms of here's the policy, this is where we're going. And I think even in the last week or two, it's been very clear that the GA are coming with a different song. You know, last week, 13, 15 and 17, our Central Council became very clear that that's what counties have to have as their priority competitions, despite some counties not wanting it, and some counties are going to rebel against it. But finally, the GA are coming and saying, this is what's happening. They're also going to do the same with Coach Ed. They also have started with player development. And I would see that in time, as per our report, in time, that there would be professionalized and a professionalized approach blended with the volunteers on the ground, driving player and coach development across the country, so that there is a consistent and similar approach in every corner of the country. And I think when the GA gets to that stage, I think a lot of the problems that we have now and a lot of the problems that were communicated to us on our journey around the country will be different. There'll be new problems. We'll still have problems, but there'll be new ones. And I'm not speaking here as an evangelist for the GA or coaching in games, but if nothing happens, then I and another 10 or 11 people would have wasted 2 or 3 years of our lives because, we did this on the guise that there was going to be change. And, this committee was led by Michael Dempsey, and I'm not sure do you know him, but he is the most genuine guy that you will ever meet and the most passionate GA person you will ever meet, and hugely, hugely able. And, I would think that the likes of Mick and others are the way forward for the association in terms of guiding us through this series of changes that have to come. Now, it's going to be very difficult. And, the last thing I would say, Ciaran, is that, again, you have to go back to context and culture, and you have to understand what is the GA and what was the GA based on. It was based on a nationalistic sense of pride and identity that began at the most simplest roots of parish. And even though we're 140 years on, the simple roots of parish still wanting to get the better of the next parish so that we could look them in the eye en masse the following Sunday, that's still there. And that's where it becomes very difficult for us to instigate change in coaching, because it means so much to win for people. It means so much to win. And this is a different sport, in my opinion, than everything else, because it's so rooted in the parish. So that's why it takes us a bit longer to get these things over the line. But I would be absolutely hopeful that there is change coming. I see a lot of moving underneath the surface at the moment in terms of trying to get things prepared so the change can occur. And as I say, the next 12 months will either teach me that I'm a fool, or we'll be heading in a different direction.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. And I think just the philosophy and the learnings and the good coaching practice, like Shane and yourself and Barry have spoken about tonight. And I know, we all know lots of coaches all around the country and in different counties who believe in that way of coaching and that philosophy about development and keeping everybody involved and let people play as being the most important aspect, participation in the GA and with the club at the centre. I think that can really help to kind of drive that change over the next year and few years, I think, as well. Okay, lads, thank you very much. So Barry, thanks very much. Brian and Shane, it's brilliant to have you on. I'm sure if you would like, we'll get you on again at another stage just to kind of jump into a few specific topics a little bit more. I hope we've covered most of the topics anyway around youth coaching, but I know, as you guys know, there's so many questions you could speak about and topics and everything and themes. We'll definitely get you back on and we'll jump into those things a little bit more. Thanks to all the DSS members who've logged in and your questions, which were brilliant. I think it adds to the conversation and discussion really well. Give us your feedback. The podcast will be put out on Friday morning, and then the video will be up on YouTube as well if you prefer to consume it like that. Thanks to our sponsors, Ripped.app, which I'll have a quick word about after the outro. I'll tell you a little bit about their services and stuff like that. And for everybody listening, guys, thanks very much, and we'll speak properly again.
Thanks, guys. Good job, lads.
Cheers, guys. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Brian.
How about Ciaran?
This episode is sponsored by Ripped, who have come on board with us. Ripped is a platform that connects coaches with their clients and athletes. Using Ripped, coaches can create individualized training programs and monitor their clients' progress via the Ripped app at www.ripped.app, where they can track exercise, training loads, and very importantly, well-being data. Ripped is used by high-performance teams such as Swim Ireland and Kerry GA, and also by gyms and online coaches to manage their clients. We're using it ourselves for the new DSS online training service, where you can have your own personal trainer and S&C coach to help you get fit and ready for the season, or just lose weight and get fit. We have a special offer for coaches over on our website where you can get 2 months free access to Ripped. Just head over to our podcast page on deelysportscience.com/pod, and you'll find a link to sign up for that 2 months free access. If you'd like some more information on Ripped as a service, just go to www.ripped.app to read more there. Thanks again, guys, for your support. The Locker Room Podcast is brought to you by deelysportscience.com, an online elite coaching and sports science service, membership service. You can search all the information and services over at deelysportscience.com. You'll see everything over there. I'm here with Ross and Joe. Lads, there's loads of stuff going on at the moment. Ross, we'll run through them really quick. Ross, you've got a really interesting off-season coaches CPD series, video series for the members.
Yeah, really good, Keir. So six-part presentation, 6 different topics that are kind of out there on social media and stuff. And I'm kind of, let's say, doing 3 to 4 of them, and you guys are taking the baton on that. So really good so far. We've had 2 released based on the individual training session and periodization. Recorded one recently around developing the individual player. We've got one around the physical corner, and then you guys are taking over the tactical side and also the environment and culture. So really good opportunity, especially with things going on in Ireland at the minute, to learn and keep sharing information. So really enjoyed that, really good feedback, and they'll be released throughout the next 6 weeks.
Great stuff. Joe, there's loads of Gaelic football and hurling practices gone up as well.
Yeah, there is, Ciaran. Every week there are Gaelic practices going up, and I know that Ross talked about. I think I'm doing CPD session 4, which is how to set up a team tactically. So I'm putting up some kickouts there, for instance, and some defensive structures that coaches can kind of get used to in the off season and plan to bring in maybe next season. So yeah, lots of stuff there coming up on the website in terms of practices.
Good stuff. We've got an off season GA program as well, in terms of gym program and fitness and running program as well, designed by Ben Smalley, our sports scientist as well, and overlooked by Ross as well, head of performance. So that's really good for all members. So they're all exclusive members. The last 2 things to mention then is the Locker Room webinar series, which is closed for exclusive for our DSS members. So that's every second Monday night. We bring on an expert to do a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation through Zoom. Everyone can dial in live and then ask some questions as well. It's been really popular, and it's a brilliant new initiative. We're always coming up with these new initiatives. The last thing then to mention is the Buddy Referral Scheme. So that's where a member can send a referral to their friend. The friend will get 25% off the sign-up fee, and then the member will get access to one of the GA positional profile videos. So Ross, we did them over the last few weeks. I think there's some good content there.
Class content. I think it's a great initiative. Instead of just, normally the person who refers someone doesn't get anything, and the new member gets whatever the offer is. But this stuff is gold dust, in my opinion. You get info on what each positional essential is and what you're looking for each player and how to coach it. So it gives you real good information on developing the individual players in your team.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, for members, it's less than 15 quid a month. Ross, that's less than a Ross Bennett haircut once a month to cut back those golden locks.
And less than, I think the book I wrote 4 years ago still hasn't creeped up to 15 quid. So you're getting so much for that, for sure. Yeah, and I only get a haircut once a year, Keir, so £15 a year is not bad, I don't think.
Yeah, the girls in the house here, Ross, they just said, what is the point in Ross Bennett if he doesn't have long, flowing blonde hair? They get disappointed when it's cut.
I know, it's coming back. It's coming back.
So yeah, the book, so for the price of Ross Bennett's book, which you should all go out and buy, I've forgotten the name of it now at the moment. But I
can tell you, kids, injury prevention and rehabilitation. Now, he never knew I was going to plug that on here, but I need sales. Christmas is coming up. I need some sales. Christmas
is coming. I've got 2 copies of them here, Ross, so we can sell that off second hand to Joe. He might be able to use it.
You need them for the doorstop in those heavy doors of yours.
Yeah, exactly. Joe, I was just about to say that you'd need a few quid for the online dating, but those days are over for you.
Yeah, I think they are, Ciaran. Hopefully.
Hopefully. Good to hear.
He tried to keep it quiet, but those weekends in the New Forest, we knew you wasn't going on your own, Joe.
Exactly. It was dodgy. It was dodgy. 15 quid, Joe, per month. Not much.
Yeah, 15 quid a month. Yeah, I've had a look at I think 4 or 5 of the positions, and I've never ever seen as much detail in terms of the different positions in football, in Gaelic football, broken down into so much detail. So there's lots of, as Ross said, it's gold dust. There's lots of great learning points there for coaches and managers. Great,
good stuff. Okay, enjoy the rest of the episode, everybody. The podcast, remember, deelysportscience.com, and head over. We've actually started a new offer for listeners to the podcast, so just use POD20 as a voucher code to sign up membership, and you get 20% off as well. So for any new members out there or relapsed members, just use POD20 and you get 20% off membership. A good time, as the lads say, Ross was saying, with all the new CPD and everything. So a good time to join up. Okay, enjoy.